Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, author of the book, What the Nurses Saw. Today, we're talking with another author, Jodi O'Malley. Here's her book. We're going to talk about her experiences as a nurse before, during, and after. Well, the COVID, I don't know, is the COVID era over? Certainly, deaths in the hospitals caused by maltreatment in hospitals is not over. So it's hard to tell what period we're in right now. But there was definitely a before. Well, there's a before COVID, and I guess after COVID. And Jodi, you're a nurse.
Yes.
And what was I always ask every nurse this question: when did you know you wanted to be a nurse? And what was it that triggered that feeling?
I always wanted to be a nurse growing up. I liked the trauma aspect of it, if you will. I wanted to be, on the trauma team and stuff. Having kids young at 16 and then 20, I forgot about it. And when I reunited with my childhood sweetheart when I was 35, he said, "Well, I thought you'd be a nurse." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "You always talked about it." And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. It's so funny how life can take you away from like your passion and your dream. So this time I started back off as a CNA to make sure that I wanted to do this. And I did. I absolutely loved it. And
What's a CNA for people that don't know the lingo?
a certified nurse's assistant. I started off in the hospital running food trays at the age of 35, and then became a CNA and then a PCT,
What's that? What's a
the
PCT?
a patient care tech, where we could draw blood. We, went into doctor's orders, was looking at the telemonitor, the heart rhythms, and monitoring that, and then also providing bedside care. And then I became an RN, got my bachelor's, and then got my master's degree.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So it was something that you had in mind. You kind of had the temperament for it, but yeah, having kids that early or having kids ever will keep you busy.
That's
Um,
true. You
yeah.
forget your dreams, right?
And then what was your specialty as a nurse or specialties?
Wow. Well, I mean, I really hit the ball running. When I was, in nursing school, I worked as a tech in the ICU. So when I graduated, I went to med surge, ER, pain management, ICU, pre-op, PACU, and detox
What's
recovery.
PACU?
PACU is a post anesthesia care unit. So
Okay.
I would see people before they went into surgery, and then I would care for them after surgery, and then also detox and recovery, which was one of my favorites. And that's helping people detox off of drugs and alcohol. And but really, if I had to pick one, it would be the ER. I love ER nursing.
Okay.
Oh, and hospital supervisor.
Okay. So you had a very well-rounded career and you like trauma. You're not
Yes.
afraid of it.
No, 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 not at all. Yeah.
And so now COVID arrives, and we're told that there's a disease never before seen by man. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, if you look at somebody across the room, you're going to transmit it. If you get it, you're going to die.
Hmm.
There's no treatment, and they hammered us with those lies, that insanity. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They terror bombed the population. They managed to fool a whole lot of nurses and doctors, which I still don't understand. Uh,
Yeah.
but then there, but then there were a lot of nurses who said, "Wait a minute, I've been a nurse a long time. This doesn't make any sense. I'm not buying it. I need to know a
Right.
lot more." Tell us about your experience with the front end of COVID.
Well, immediately when I found out that there's this virus, that came from a bat soup in Wuhan, China, and then the whole world was going to shut down with this 2 weeks to slow the spread mentality. I literally looked up in the nurse's station to the heavens, and I said, I'm supposed to pay attention to this part, right? And I meant it. It's like all of my days and hours of being in church and hearing about prophecy and end times really just came rushing to me at that moment. Because for the first time ever in the history of the world, this was a global event. And I knew that, that this is what it would look like. Now, having said that, I hadn't really been in church since I was a teenager. Throughout throughout the years, I tried to find churches, but I never found any that, I was the same spirit-filled church that I grew up in Chicago. And so I never really got back into it, but I had the word on my heart. I knew what was, laid on my heart. And so for me, that was the very first time where I, at that moment, was like, okay, I will choose faith over fear as I'm commanded to. And because I did that, I never lost critical thinking. I never lost my ability to remove myself from this 24/7 emotion, which is propaganda, right?
Right.
And I stuck to the facts. I stuck to the ethics of my profession, and I stuck to the evidence-based practice of my profession, which is, looking at the best evidence we have available and not making it up because some talking head from a 3-letter agency is on the news every day telling us what to do. So,
Yeah, there was, for example, one of the things that really struck me as I was doing the research for the book is that these protocols for COVID, which is what the book focuses on that, and we can talk about all kinds of things, but just this issue for the moment. Um, there respiratory problems and inflammation are not new.
right.
And there is billions of hours of clinical experience that has been logged, and people know how to treat these things, but somehow, uh, as you pointed out, the 3-letter agencies, no doubt with the assistance of lawyers, decided they were going to rewrite medicine on the fly based on nothing, literally nothing. And using, I guess, these legal means that they had engineered over the decades, they were able to enforce this unmedical, anti-scientific, illogical protocol on
Yep.
the hospitals. So crazy. And I'm wondering if you experienced this too. They wouldn't allow, once you were deemed a COVID patient, suddenly you were in an alternate reality medically. Like
Mhm.
all previous medical experience no longer applied. All previous science no longer applied. So one of the things they did was deny people who showed up with respiratory problems and inflammation ibuprofen.
Mhm.
Did they do that where you were too?
Yes, we denied, steroids. We denied nebulizers. We denied antibiotics. We denied everything. If somebody was COVID positive, they would say there's nothing that we can do. Even when a patient got admitted into the hospital. And in my lawsuit with the government, I have 3 different patients that I took sputum samples on that had been there for a week or 2 weeks, and they were getting worse. See, I worked float pool then, Ken. I worked
What's that called? Float pool?
float pool. So I had just moved to the float pool department from the surgery department in January of 2020. And this is where they would send me to ER, ICU, or med surge. They
Wherever you were needed.
wherever I was
And
needed.
you
And
had and you were already qualified in all those specialties, so you were like the perfect person.
correct. Correct. And they noticed that I had a lot of critical thinking and assessment skills. So I actually became the house supervisor about 60% of the time. And so, I would always talk with the doctors about their admitting a patient, where were they appropriate to go, that type of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in this instance that I give you about these patients that were COVID, they're COVID, and I would go to the doctor and say, hey, they're spiking a temperature. Their white blood cell count is going up. Do you think you want to put an antibiotic on board? And they said, no, they're COVID. And because I'm a strong nurse with strong assessment and clinical skills, I got the sputum sample anyway.
What
And
kind of a sample could you
a
tell?
sputum sample,
Like spit?
yeah, well,
Okay.
like deep lung, you know how when you
Oh, okay.
cough up like mucus,
Okay.
that is the gold standard. That is the gold standard to determine what is going on in your lungs, right?
Gotcha.
And so I got a sputum sample, and then I would tell the doctor, hey, I got it. Do you want me to put the order in, or do you? And then they would say, oh, go ahead, Jodi, just put it in. And all three times, Ken, they came back with multiple different community acquired pneumonias. So hence they were laying in this bed, being a COVID patient, not recognizing anything else that could be possibly going on with this person. And all three of them wound up dying.
Wow.
I come to find out. So this was a big problem, like you say. The person was COVID positive, whether by a faulty experimental PCR test, or remember, we gave the doctors the ability to say assumed or presumed.
Presumptive. I
Yes.
forgot about that. The old presumptive COVID case. Oh my goodness. Right.
Yeah. So once that happened, that person was isolated. Their standard of care went way down, right? Because nurses and doctors weren't going in the room as much anymore. Doctors were able to chart on the patient's record, report received from nurse due to lessening COVID interaction. Like what? So doctors were not even going in and assessing the patient because they were just COVID. And we don't do anything for COVID.
Wow.
Crazy.
And as a veteran nurse with experience in all kinds of areas, you know that inflammation is inflammation. There's no special flavor of inflammation, right?
Right.
And to not not address inflammation is like a fireman. You see the shed's on fire. Well, let it burn. Now the
Yeah.
house is on fire because you didn't
Right.
put the shed out.
Right.
And the doctors were going along with this.
They were. Well, see, I worked for a federal hospital for the Native Americans. So
Ah,
my hospital was Phoenix Indian Medical Center under the branch of HHS, IHS, Indian Health Service. So these doctors, they were controlled as well. Everybody, a lot of these doctors were in the, oh, what is that branch called?
Bureau,
The,
Bureau of Internal.
no, the Public Health Commission Corps.
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So they were under there, they serve their time in the underserved communities, and then they move on. So we called them like baby doctors. They weren't able to use their critical thinking because they put a diagnosis in. Even in private hospitals, this is what happens. A doctor that works for a hospital, they put the chief complaint in, and then it pops up with a list of available medications that they can take. And then they have to go in order. Even though they know that, Z works better than A, they still have to go through the process because there's no real physician patient relationship anymore.
And this is,
Not in,
by the way, this is pre-COVID, but we're talking about. It was already crazy
yeah,
for COVID. I mean, just think how crazy that is. What do you need to go to medical school for? Just,
right,
go to the machine, do what the machine tells you. Drug number one doesn't work very well and isn't even indicated for this person, but the machine tells you to do it, so you give it to them. Is that
right.
pretty much what it got reduced
Pretty
to?
much. Yeah.
Wow. And so you have young doctors, and I had a young relative that was doing very well in medical school, and then he started to get the sense of what he was getting into, and he left the profession.
Mhm.
And these guys are brainwashed. They're
Yes.
it's they're like they enter a secret society
Mhm.
that has its own rules and its own hierarchies, and you either go along with it or you're not going to come out the other end with an MD. And they're
Same as
not.
nursing school now. It's the same.
And
All
there's
of all of these schools are like that. But see, I think doctors are also captured because they're making $500,000 or more a year.
Right.
You know, it's really hard to walk away. I overheard, because I'm back in the ER actually,
Oh,
but which is really nice. But I overheard a couple of them talking at shift change about how, like, how could I leave? Like, they were almost envious of the nurse practitioners, right? Because they can leave and they could go anywhere they want. They have all this experience everywhere, but doctors almost pigeonholed. And they said, well, you know, we're making 500,000. Where are we going to find that anywhere else? And
yeah.
whoa, you know,
Wow.
yeah.
And this is a sidebar, but I think I always like to talk about this issue with every nurse. In order of experience, who is likely to have more clinical experience, i.e., being with the patient, seeing the patient's evolution? A nurse, an experienced nurse, or even an experienced doctor? Who spends more time with patients and sees more?
Oh, by far, nurses. You know, we're spending, you know, essentially a 12-hour shift with them. A doctor may come for 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So, yeah.
So if somebody is looking for someone that has the most clinical experience possible, you're more likely to get that from an experienced nurse than any doctor you can find, even if he went to Harvard and, has been practicing 30 years. Uh,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
maybe a little later we'll talk about the very positive development of many nurses starting to realize that they can set themselves up as private practitioners or work with other nurses or work, however they configure themselves and work with patients and the community directly, and not necessarily being in one of these hospital scenarios. Um, the other thing that I always like to talk about is, where did these orders seem to come from your perspective, as someone receiving the orders from on high? Where were these crazy things coming from?
Well, that's interesting you say that, because in my lawsuit, we're in the deposition phase against HHS now. And, you know, I reached out to some of the brightest minds and we all put our heads together. Who do we depose? Fauci? He was a talking head. I think he's a distraction, right? So I mean, they had to come from FDA, HHS,
See, I imagine,
CDC.
here's what I imagine. There was a group of people, right? It had to be in a room all together, maybe with a whiteboard, and they were saying, "We've got this new disease that comes from bat soup," or whatever insanity they made up. Let's create a protocol for it. And they did a couple of things. Number one, they created a protocol that made no sense, that practically ensured they would kill or seriously injure the maximum number of people, right? Because don't give them anti-inflammatory, don't give them steroids, put them on a BiPAP right away, use this failed Ebola drug that's known to damage kidneys and organs. Let's give them that. And then when they're really sick, let's do the most invasive thing short of cutting you open, intubate you and put you on a vent. That'll kill a lot of people. So
Yeah.
they came up with, so they planned that out, right? And then they said, well, let's add financial incentives to every step. So if they call them a COVID patient, the cash register rings automatically. So we're going to incentivize them to call people COVID patients, even if they've got pneumonia or
Yeah.
asthma, or one of the saddest stories I ever heard, a panic attack. Young man came in his 30s, perfectly healthy, had a panic attack. They intubated him and killed him.
Mhm.
So then we'll also incentivize them for giving them these bags of remdesivir. And if you do a course, we'll give you X. If you do 2 courses, we'll give you more. If you do 3, so I've got a thing that I'm following in Minnesota, where this poor guy was put on 3 courses of remdesivir before they finally killed him. And then the next incentive, of course, was, hey, we'll intubate you. And then the one that blew my mind was, if you stay on the vent for 96 hours or more, we'll give you a special bonus. So they came up with a program that made no sense, that was likely to injure and kill. Then they incentivized it. Then the third thing they did was they somehow put an enforcement arm, which is if you were a nurse and you talked about it, you were out of there, or a doctor, you were out. It might have just simply been, and I'll ask you this question: who really runs the hospitals? Is it the doctors? Is it? I mean, functionally, who takes care of the patients? It's clearly the nurses.
Yeah, and the nurses run the hospital, they're the chief CNO. Doctors have issues, they go to the CNO.
Okay, but who can order people? Who can take people off their job with the stroke of a pen? That would be the hospital administrators, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that there was this group in Washington that came up with the thing that made no sense. They incentivized it. I guess the financial incentives were enough for the hospital administrators to just say, yeah, give them remdesivir, put them on event. We're getting rich. And then they were the ones that passed it down the line to the doctors and the nurses. And
Hmm.
then if you were a nurse and said, hey, I'm not doing this, I'm not
Hmm.
going along with this, you were out of there. And then as we document in the book, some nurses were blackballed, uh, couldn't get work. I mean, the most interesting one that was so clear was as a respiratory therapist, Mark Bischoffsky, 23 years experience, sterling reputation, in high demand, especially during COVID. And when they blackballed him, nobody in the whole region would hire him. They all needed him, and for political reasons, they wouldn't hire him. And then they attacked the nurses. I mean, I'm telling you stuff but this is for our listeners in case this is all new to them. Then they would attack licensing. They would have people in these troll mobs cook up complaints against nurses' licenses, and then they would send the troll mobs after nurses. It was unbelievable. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you
Yeah,
experienced quite a bit of that.
I
Um,
did.
so somewhere there's a group of people in Washington, D.C., and they probably sat around a conference table and planned it all out. And I talked to Tom, Tom Rentz, the attorney.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, he can't figure out who it was either. But I
No,
know,
he was one of the people I talked to. I was like, all right, Tom, listen, we have 10 people we could depose. Who should we depose? Yeah, I mean, I talked to Corey. I talked to, a lot of people in this fight. And I was like, who should they be? So we have our names of who we're going to depose to get some answers. But yes, that happened to me, Ken. It happened to me. It's on video. HHS has all of my videos now because I was recording what was happening after my coworker died. That was when I said, enough is enough. And I had more than, I think it was 18 complaints against my license.
wow.
And I had to go in front of the Arizona State Board of Nursing. And they ordered me to undergo a formal ethics evaluation, which deemed me ethical in my disclosure. But the way I handled it, and for everybody here listening, and I really want this to resonate with you. I don't know if you're used to bullies, but I am. I grew up having to fight them
Well, you grew
physically.
up in Chicago. You got to
I
be tough.
did. Yes. And so when I knew that I was right, that I was following the side of truth, because all of my training showed me that. And whether or not I was right or wrong with what was happening with COVID, I was following evidence-based practice, which is the foundation of our profession. So nobody could get me on anything, even if I wasn't right about the vaccine causing heart issues, those types of things. I knew that what I was blowing the whistle on was patient safety issues. And nobody could fault me for that. Even when my boss told me, you can't talk about ivermectin here, I laughed. I laughed, and then I was like, really? Well, that's not going to not happen because this is science. And we should be able to talk about science. So when the bully and when they started coming, so I blew the whistle in September of 21. In December of 21 is when the National Council of the State Board of Nursing issued a statement saying how they were going to handle people like me,
Mhm.
people that were speaking out against what the FDA and the CDC had to say. And so for a second there, I thought, oh man, they're going to make an example out of me, right? They're really going to use me and hang my head. But God had other plans. So this is where I really want people to understand that we are here for such a time as this, right? If you have that little whisper, some people call it intuition, instinct. I call it God talking to us to do something, to say, this isn't right. You should pay attention to it. Like, stick with that instead of trying to decipher all the craziness in the world, because we know that deception abounds. We're filled with it in every facet of our life. It's mass confusion, mass chaos. Nothing makes sense. It's all to a detriment of our psyche and our spirit, right? And our physical body. So yeah, like don't cower down to all of that. And and if you are a believer, we have to trust that he will provide, and most certainly he has for me. I mean, I'm still in my 900 square foot apartment, but I'm happy. You know what I'm saying? I'm waking up every day, and knowing that I have a purpose. I'm going to bed every night knowing that I have given all that I can to humanity for while I'm here on earth. And what's the worst that can happen? They take me out. Well, big deal. Then I go to be with my Lord, right? So I just want to make sure that I really hone in on that before we do leave. And I don't know if that answered your question, because I got a little fired up
No,
there.
that's okay. It's a really good point. Every nurse in the book, and all the nurses that I've spoken with since, and it's been a lot, and it's going to be even more, uh, they are saying the same thing. It's like, yeah, I on one level, I paid a price.
Mhm.
On another level, I'm completely happy with what I did, and I feel great,
Right.
uh, because they know they did the right thing. And there are going to be some nurses listening to this program, and I'm not going to purport to say that any of this is easy because I'm not in your shoes, so I can't say anything. But as a general rule, it is better to do the right thing than to continue to go along with the wrong thing. And yeah, it may not be easy. It may not be a royal red carpet of ease and glamour. Probably be the exact opposite. But you'll feel good about yourself, and you're putting yourself on a strong foundation, not a foundation of sand.
Yeah.
Because you're not really, there's this newish thing going around called, was it moral injury, or was
Mm.
it,
Yeah.
and it's being distorted by, of course, the medical profession, because that seems to be the only thing they're capable of doing these days, is distort things. But it says a number of things. One of them is that you may be in a situation legitimately where someone's cut in half, and you have to see it, and you can't do anything. Like, you can't reattach the two parts of the body. They've been in some horrible, that hurts to see it. I mean, but then there's the other moral injury where maybe you could have done something and you didn't. That's
That's the
gonna
struggle.
that's gonna be hard to live with, and hopefully you've got a long life ahead of you, young nurses. And you don't need a 5,000 square foot house to be
Mm.
happy.
Nope.
You know, you
More
need,
money, more problems, they say.
yeah, yeah. And the positive thing is, and I want to talk about that. So many things I want to talk with you about. Um, I want to talk about the lawsuit. I want to talk about the new network the growing network of nurses that are saying, you know what, we know a lot. We've been trained well. We've seen more than any doctor. We're perfectly capable of being your health provider. Now, if there's something, if you need surgery, we'll send you to a surgeon, or there's something really, that requires the system. We'll make sure you get to the system. But there's a whole lot of stuff that doesn't need to land you in a doctor's office or an ER or anywhere, especially if you cut it off early,
Yeah.
and catch it early is what I really should say. Um, so many things. Let's talk about the lawsuit. This is interesting. I don't know
Yeah.
the details because it's not in the book. By the way, Jodi has a book,
Yes.
Rare Courage.
Yeah. So the lawsuit, this is, O'Malley versus HHS. And I am naming So I had a bunch of allegations, right? Why did we not give any treatment? Why did we use experimental remdesivir? Why did it come with a bonus payout? Why did we use a faulty PCR test to drive up the numbers in the hospital? Why did we remove the advocate from the bedside? I have a lot of those types of issues that I blew the whistle on, and the underreporting of vaccines, right? Injuries, right? Safety signals were not being reported. And so back in November of, because we had to go through this process, the Office of Special Counsel, then you get to the Merit System Protection Boards. Then we got in front of a judge, a federal judge. And in November, HHS wanted to mediate with me. And I said, well, I'm not mediating because I didn't do this for money. I did this to hold you guys accountable and the American public to know. And thankfully, my attorney, Mike Yoder, has a heart of a lion because they were doing everything possible to, just drain you financially, right? Pound you in paperwork. So it's like you can't keep up. And Mike has stuck with me from the beginning, praise God. And we both said, like, no, we're not taking the payout.
Right.
And the judge said at that time, well, you two are on the most opposite you can be. You're all the way over here and they're all the way over here. I have no idea how you could even mediate at this point.
Right.
And I said, well, Your Honor, I have the truth on my side. So I don't care about all of that. It took him 8 months. In July of last year, he said that I made non-frivolous allegations subject to further proof, and HHS had to hand over their documents. So the lawsuit is now in the discovery deposition phase. So they picked their people.
That's slow. He took a long time to even get to the starting gate with you. 8 months. Okay, well, at least he did it.
He
And
did
by the way,
it.
this is another case, Jodi. You could have taken a big check and walked off into the sunset, and it would have been easy. And now you're going into unknown territory and a lot more work and a lot more expense, a lot more time. And again, you chose the right path. So
Yeah.
you're not just advising people to do this. You're walking the talk. So now you're in discovery. So discovery is where you get to ask questions of the other side. This is exciting.
That's right.
So there'll be depositions.
This month of February, all depositions. I think
Yeah.
they need to be done by the 23rd is the
Okay.
last day the judge gave them. So by the 23rd, we'll have all of the depositions and see what happens from there. You know, I'm looking for this to go to trial. We'll have to obviously raise some money for that to happen because that's a huge expense. But I think one that Americans really want to know, right? They want to know, who was it that said overnight, all hospitals got on board with this. You know, everybody just fell into lockstep with it. What happened? Who did this? Because those are the people that need to be held accountable.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, they came up with I call them the killer protocols because I don't know what else to call them. I mean, if you wanted to kill as many people as you could and seemingly get away with it, you would do exactly what they did. And then they incentivized it. And I think the incentivization was what made it go national instantly. Everybody got a fax or an email saying, hey, we're going to pay you big bucks if you do A, B, and C. And the CFO and the hospital administrator said, this is it, guys. This is where we're going. But I'd love to know who those people were. So you mentioned there are 10 people that you had to pick 10.
Yeah.
Will we ever get to see these depositions?
I believe so. Yeah. I asked my attorney. He said, yeah, yes. That after they're done, then it'll be public knowledge. But it's not filmed. It's,
Oh, it's not filmed.
No, it's not like, well, maybe they'll film the video recording. I don't know.
Because often depositions are video. You know, there's a camera.
Oh, well, then maybe they are. Yeah, they probably will
Well,
be
you
now.
know
I
what?
never had to be in this before,
Oh,
so.
okay. The marketer in me says, boy, that would be a great pay-per-view program. I'd pay to see, especially if somebody would edit the highlights. And by the way, I'm volunteering to do that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Um, that would be a great pay-per-view to help raise money for the next stage, which would be a trial. I,
Oh.
I guess after the deposition, then the judge decides, hey, this needs to go to trial, or he goes, there's nothing here.
Mhm.
That's kind of the decision he makes.
I think so.
Yeah.
I try not to talk to my attorney, as much as I don't have to. He's 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 a friend of mine too, but he's so busy, so
No,
I
of
just
course,
don't have a
and
lot of
time
stuff.
is money, and there's only one of them.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier what people can't appreciate it unless they've experienced it. Law is warfare by paper.
Mhm.
And the other side will send you 20 bankers boxes full of documents that you now have to read, or your attorney has to read, your attorney and the staff has to read it, and that's how they try to beat us, by burying us in all kinds of legal things, all of which have to be addressed. You can't just ignore something because it may
Right.
come up in the case later and you'd ignored it and therefore the case was dismissed. It's a tough game psychologically. So hats off to Mike Roeder. Yoder tell us his name so I have it correct.
Yoder, Michael Yoder.
Michael Yoder.
Hmm.
And where's his office?
DC.
He's in DC.
Mhm.
Great. And is there a formal fundraising thing in place to help support?
No, not yet. I guess we'll see. I don't know. I don't have anything. He doesn't have anything.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Well, maybe we'll talk about that off camera, because I think
perfect.
I'm ready to write a check right now.
Oh, oh
I
my
want to
gosh.
see I want the answers to the questions you're asking. And strangely, I really don't see a lot of people asking these pertinent questions. I'm gonna make a comment. This is my comment, everybody, not Jodi's, so don't blame her. But there's at least 10 trillion words have been written about COVID. And some of them are real esoteric scientific issues, and that's fine. It's all important. But I don't see a lot of people focusing on the common sense issues like who ordered this? Who
Right.
planned this? I want the names. I want to
Mhm.
know where it happened, when it went down, and what
Yeah.
made them think they could get away with it is my big question too. But I don't see a lot of people asking those very fundamental questions, and I want the answers.
Well, that's interesting you say that. I actually interviewed Renz on my show last week, and we were talking about this, and I said, "Do you think my case what do you think my case has the ability to do?" And he said it has the ability to just, blow the lid off of
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
He said the problem is that people aren't asking the right questions. And with my attorney, he's young. He's 30 years old, maybe 31 now, just had a baby. Prior to this, he was like, you know what? Like, I know I am called here for a mission. And again, he has the same spirit, like a warrior spirit that I do. And Ken, that's like so rare. Like it's so rare
Yeah.
that people will be able to will are willing to sacrifice of themselves for the greater good. Extremely rare. And the fact that he's willing to do that is just huge. And if there's anybody that is going, I mean, he called, HHS little bitches on Instagram. You know what I'm saying? He's not afraid and tagged him in it. So
Wow.
yeah, he's not afraid. So yeah, I'm very blessed and thankful that he's on my side.
Well, we all are, that he exists and that he's taking this fight, and that you're taking the fight to these people, because we need the answer. It's unbelievable. We can't even calculate the human harm. I mean, we can count the number of people killed. We can count the number of people that sustained serious injuries. But we can't even calculate the human harm, but the financial harm, trillions of dollars,
Oh yeah.
you know, and you would think that somebody, and you are, thank God, and he is, Mike is, are asking the questions that matter, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, I know you've got a tight time limit. So before we say goodbye, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of nurses creating a parallel, an alternative uh, to our very disturbed and messed up healthcare system. What are the nurses doing positively as a result of this catastrophe?
Well, there's been a lot of nurses behind the scenes, right? When I say behind the scenes, they don't get the social media attention. You know, say I have some social media attention because of how I blew the whistle, but it's real hard to even gain traction there, right? Because it's so censored or shadow banned. So there's these amazing nurses that we have found over the last couple years that walked away, that started their own IV business, that went into the homes and were treating people, keeping them out of the hospital. So many of them, and now we're all at this spot where we kind of figured out how to get a website, kind of figured out how to market or how to edit or get an email distribution list, blah, 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 you know, the business side of it. And now we're there, but now I just feel like this is the year of the nurse because we're at a spot right now where we stand on our own, but we also know one another. And to network with one another, there is no, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody about you because I need these people, right? I need this, you know, the money or anything like that. We're not there because we need millions and millions of people need help and we can't help everyone. So it's a very nice spot to be in to say that we are all networking with each other. We're promoting one another's work. Like for me, for example, I have the truth movement. You know, it's different. I kind of went away from doing the health and nurse coach. You know, my mission's different. So
Right.
people and everybody has a different mission. You know, I have another lady who's doing of NAD infusions up in Wisconsin to help people detox. You know, then you have Melissa who's training people on functional medicine, Kimberly who has remnant nursing to put nurses to work and get people, you know, the advocate that they need. I just all of us are just doing some amazing things. And yeah, now this is a year we're coming together. I think we need to do like a nurse tour, you know, and get into the cities. The nurses that are prominent in those communities help lift up their voices and educate the community on what's been done and where we're going and how, you know, we can help one another now. You know, you just talked to Nurse David, who is the psychiatric nurse, the mental health. Like we have it all. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm very, very hopeful that this is the year where people hear about the nurse and we get the gain the trust back, a little bit of what was lost.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I like that. The year of the nurse. The year of the
Yeah.
nurse. I think you're right. And maybe the next book I do should be, you know, we've got what the nurses saw, and the next book should be what the nurses are doing about it.
Yes, I
You
love
know?
that.
I
Yeah.
think that might be the next thing. So, and because I wanna we're gonna say goodbye because I know you have to go soon.
Yeah.
But I want to give people hope that there are capable, ethical health professionals that care about you, who will talk with you, who will listen to you, who aren't under the yoke of pharma and these hospitals. Again, if you need an appendectomy or open heart surgery, you know, they're not gonna be able to help you there. Um, Maybe you won't need the surgery if, you know, that's a whole other thing. But there's certain obviously very technical, capital intensive things, but that's not 99% of medicine. 99% of medicine is bread and butter stuff, and the nurses are more than capable of helping you with that, for often for a lot less money, often with a lot more compassion and with a higher success rate because they're not forced to go down a path that's making somebody else rich at your expense, the
That's
expense of the patient.
exactly. Yeah, I'm actually getting ready to interview a nurse that teaches on post cardiac care. Okay.
So
So
important.
how big of a deal is that, Ken, where people go to the ER and they get diagnosed with a heart issue or they get transferred into the hospital and now they have all these new meds, all these new, criteria that they need to follow. And then nobody really, the primary care doctor doesn't follow them.
Yeah.
And she charges $1,200. 1,200 to help go. I mean, it just, yeah, we have nurses rising up who leave in the system and actually helping people. Yeah.
And then the last thing, I think we got one more minute. I want to say this is really important. Being a nurse or being a doctor or being super informed about all this stuff doesn't by itself protect you from being a victim of this system, which, we have plenty of cases of nurses who lost husbands, healthcare workers that died as a result of these protocols. So, even if you are experienced in all this stuff, you still need to become independent and standing on your own 2 feet because you're not protected. Even if you think you're in the system, you're part of the system, they're not taking care of you either. So that's a whole nother issue. But Jodi, thank you so much for this time and for what you're doing. And I want to let people know about Jodi's book. Thanks for this lawsuit. I hope we'll have a chance to talk again about that.
Yes, please, please, Ken. I would love to.